Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. This year, India is celebrating its 9th National Voters' Day on January 25th. The Voters' Day celebration was initiated in 2011 by the then President of India, Pratibha Devi Patil, on the 61st Foundation Day of the Election Commission of India. Established in 1950, the Election Commission of India is an organization that aims to increase the participation of numbers of voters and to encourage newly eligible voters. National Voters' Day 2019 was celebrated in over 6 lakh locations covering about 10 lakh polling stations all over the country. President Ram Nath Kovind was the chief guest at the main function organized by the ECI in the national capital. The best electoral practices and national awards were conferred to officers for their exceptional performance in conducting elections. No voter to be left behind is the chosen theme for this year's celebration, and it is also the focus in the upcoming Lok Sabha elections. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze why we should vote and how do we ensure more people join the process. Joining me on the program today are Akshay Roth, former Director General Election Commission of India, Ashok Tandon, senior journalist, Professor Rajveer Sharma, political commentator, and Sanjay Kumar, Director, Center for the Study of Developing Societies. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Roth, I'd like to begin the program with you. Let's first try and understand how the voting process itself has transformed over the years and what are some of the major reforms that have been undertaken.
It has been quite a journey. In fact, immediately after the independence, at the time of first election, there was a thought, there was a debate among certain circles that a country which is so large, just independent, has come out of a trauma and so much of illiteracy and poverty, 16% of literacy. And is it a country ready, particularly the people, are they ready to go for direct elections by casting their votes and choosing their candidates? But I think at that time, the founding fathers took a huge step forward and a magical step forward and a very brave step forward to go to universal franchise, adult franchise. And that has yielded a lot of dividends. And election after the election, as it has happened, on precisely, on time, and every time, and very correctly, efficiently managed by the Election Commission of India, and with the full trust and faith and action of the people of India, we have seen how the democracy has flowered. Of course, in between management to management, there have been reforms, reforms on the side of law, side of technology, side of booth-level management, the way the elections are conducted across the about 1 million polling stations. And now, as we talk today, we have about 89 crore registered voters. So it is a huge machine. And as we always mention to ourselves very proudly, we have not only the population, the size of electorate, which is combined electorate or even population of many continents. So this management has been huge and the management has been efficient. But what has happened recently, just to complete this introductory remarks of mine, is that in the recent years, it was seen that such a democracy, which is the largest democracy of the world, which is so vibrant, elections so nicely managed, why the participation should be to the extent of 40-50%? Why there should be a bit of a democracy deficit there? Why not all the people should take part in the election? Is it a problem of information gap, a motivation gap, or a facilitation gap? So the Commission has taken wonderful steps forward in the last few years by starting a program called SWEEP, Systematic Voters Education and Electoral Participation.
Absolutely.
By which, basically to fill the gaps in the areas where people don't participate, fail to participate, or don't come in and join enthusiastically. It could be awareness, it could be developing booths to make them more friendly, it could be ensuring more of confidence in terms of deployment of security, in terms of facilitation by people who are in difficult areas where they don't access polling stations or the voting process. All these have been done. For example, it was typically found that the youth don't vote. For some reason, the new voters, they lag behind. The cities, the towns, the urban population are a bit apathetic. The women are definitely seen to be having a gap in terms of voting compared to men.
Right.
So these were the areas, women, urban, youth, And there was a huge focus, say, starting from sometime after the 2009 elections.
Absolutely.
And then we have seen the results in 2014 election, in which we found that these gaps were filled very handsomely.
All right. All right. Mr. Raut, I'll come back to you, of course, during the course of the program to try and find out, what are some of the initiatives that have been taken up by the Election Commission and how we can ensure that more and more people really partake in this wonderful process of voting, of course. But let me go across to the other guests before that. Let me go across to Sanjay Kumar now. Sanjay Kumar, how has the voting pattern and the process itself changed over the years from the 50s to, say, now?
I would not talk about processes. I would rather prefer to talk about the patterns. Processes, Akshay Raut ji has already mentioned that, about the processes. He is well equipped because he has worked with the Election Commission. I am going to talk about the patterns, how patterns have changed. There is a clear change in the pattern of voting turnout, in the voters turnout. We see a clear change in women turnout. Now there is a huge increase in women turnout in Indian elections. Now, not only women turnout has increased, if you look at the 2014 election, now women turnout and men turnout are almost equal. Women lagged behind only by 1.4% compared to men. And if we compare it with elections in 1952 or 57, in the 1950s and 60s, the gap used to be very large. There are many states now where women have outnumbered men in terms of turnout. We also saw in 2014 a huge increase in youth turnout. So these are some of the patterns which we have witnessed of changing turnout among voters in India.
Absolutely right. And Mr. Tandon, veteran journalists such as you, seen several, elections over the years. You also watched them closely during your professional career. Why is it important to vote?
No, before that, I would like to supplement what my other two friends have said in terms of the universal adult franchise. So now, in the Constituent Assembly, when this issue was being debated, there was opinion was divided. In fact, some very prominent members wanted some conditions to be applied to the franchise system, particularly in terms of income and other social strata. But as Akshay also said, that founding fathers were really very foresighted, and they said no, it will be instant universal adult franchise and nothing to do with in compartments, because in the world we have seen the universal adult franchise has not come in one go. The women were denied of the franchise even in countries like America till 1940, and I think Switzerland was the last to give voting right to women in 1970. So in that context, India matured democracy. So having said that, we have seen all along that the election process has been very effective in India. But unfortunately, what happened over the years was, maybe because there was one party rule in India, and there was one family rule at the center for quite some time, and therefore there was a debate in the Western democracies what kind of democracy India is. In fact, the term used, I remember in the Western world was, well, India is a ramshackle democracy. But when government started changing through ballot, particularly the 77 election, which for the first time returned a non-Congress government, and subsequently there was changes in the government even in the state level, then the reputation of Indian democracy really developed, and people started respecting Indian democracy, also our election system, that we have a foolproof election system. But unfortunately, subsequently again, the booth capturing became a phenomena which was bringing a bad name to our electoral system, and then we introduced the EVM. That was a consensus decision. So we have come a long way in improving our electoral system,
right,
strengthening our democracy, giving a voting right to youth, and there was a phase again somewhere then youth got disillusioned with the voting pattern. And again, when started changing, particularly after 2014, we could see the euphoria among youth and women and new voters.
Right.
And now we see till the last election in the assembly, the poll percentage has always been crossing 75%, touching 80%. This was never done at least in the mid years of our democracy.
Absolutely.
So I think we have come a long way. We can pat ourselves for strengthening Indian democracy and our election system.
Right.
So therefore, now the kind of campaign which the Election Commission has launched, the media has played a very significant role in promoting encouraging the youth to come to the polling booth and vote.
Right.
So I think it has been a very collective effort on the part of all stakeholders, whether they are political parties, whether it's the Election Commission or our media. They have all played a role. Now we can proudly say, well, India is a very established, vibrant democracy,
yeah,
and our electoral system is foolproof. And whatever doubts are being raised about EVM and all that, people don't take it seriously because people have voted in favor or against a government. So therefore, I think voting has become essential, important, is now universally known in India.
Sure.
You don't need any debate, and that is reflected in the high turnout which we are receiving or seeing even in remote areas.
Sure, sure. So, Professor Sharma, what is the role of voting and elections in a democracy?
I think while I agree with all my three earlier panelists, Abraham Lincoln, I remember, who defined that democracy is the government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now, this kind of idea and philosophy of a democracy is translated into reality only through voting. And at the same time, I think we also have realized over a period of time that people have imbibed a sense of empowerment through voting. They feel a sense of belonging, and they have a sense of ownership of the government as well. So therefore, making the government more accountable, making the government more responsible, and also to decide the direction of change and development, people are engaged in this process as well. They don't vote only for the sake of it. They won't vote only for the sake of a party A or party B, but they will bring party A or party B on the basis of their assessment, how they have performed. And let me tell you one more thing, sir, that over a period of time, if you look at the system working since 1967 till date, revolutionary changes have come through ballot. In 1967, when the Congress government was not performing according to the aspirations and wishes of the people, they brought the Congress government to a very thin majority at the center in 1967, and almost half of the state governments were given to the non-Congress parties, though it was a coalition. At the same time, at one time we felt that there shall be no end to Indira Gandhi's rule after 1975. But when elections were declared, the voter through vote brought a silent revolutionary change in the government. Even the Prime Minister lost the election. It happened only for the first time in India's history of democracy. And at the same time, when you look at the 80s to 90 period, you find that there also the voter was a very observant and a very engaging voter. That has been proved. So even in 90s and after, the vote has established that India's democracy is success and its functioning, and in fact had been impacted on the more and more participation of the people.
Right.
And at the same time, even the youth, when people feel confident that yes, we can bring a change, when you get that sense, and then you exercise your vote. That is what Mr. Tandon was referring to, that 2014, in fact, why participation and voting increased? Because there was a sense in the youth also, yes, we can bring about a change. And that is why they participated on a larger scale. And at the same time, why in between some decline in the voting percentage took place? It was merely because the voting was in fact affected by the role of money power and muscle power. And the electoral violence took place.
Right.
People were not allowed to go to the polling station. And therefore, that was rigging of the polling booths, looting of the polling booths, what deterred the voter. And
right.
therefore, there was a decline in the voting pattern in between.
Sure.
But since we have opted for a technology-driven voting, the voting is increasing.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to ask my guests to be brief in their next round of comments because you spent quite a bit of time in our introductory remarks as such. Mr. Raut, so what is the Election Commission's role really as far as the election process and voting is concerned?
Well, I think the first commitment or the mandate of the Election Commission is to ensure that there is free and fair elections delivered. And whether, I think in the recent years, it has been more understood that free and fair elections definitely should include another phrase called participative elections. And for the political parties, the voter was always important, okay? But in the sense of management, the voter has become a very central figure in quite a few recent years. Why? In fact, the Election Commission is approaching the whole issue a little scientifically for over a period of time. That's why the National Voters' Day today is being celebrated, to make sure that the new voter or the 18 plus who gets registered, he also finds a way to understand that this is an important responsibility. He has to be registered, and at a certain point of time, he has to go to vote. So a whole scientific arrangement or a scientific sense has developed towards it. Why people do not vote? It's not a homogeneous entity. You know, all the people do not vote or do vote, not for the same reasons. So we have a scientific basis to survey and research why in a particular state people did not vote. Should I tell you something interesting? In Jharkhand, I'm talking about 2 elections back, when certain people did not vote and a survey was done, it was found that 30% of them did not vote because they did not have the epic cards. The one useful information is that you do not require a voter ID card to vote. You also can have alternate documents. I'm just talking about people should know where, what, and how of elections. It should not be a technical matter for them. Then secondly, everyone, as my distinguished co-speakers were telling, they must know that their vote is so important. If they have to express yourself, in fact, the government, the Election Commission of India has added none of the above, nota provision also if you find that all the candidates are not up to your choice. But you have to express yourself, any grievances, any thoughts about society, about country, about your local constituency, about a candidate, only in the ballot box. So that is called the motivation part. Right. But you must have seen that increasingly, Election Commission is taking great care to make sure that the polling system, the access to the polling station like within 2 kilometers, for the banks and for people who are in far up places and for distant, remote placed voters, for that, now this time the slogan is, for example, no voter is to be left behind. Absolutely. Isn't it? That means there is in Gujarat, in Gir forest, there is one polling station for just one voter. So these are really iconic examples of how to facilitate the voter, which is one big end. Like there should be, these days the model polling booths have developed in which women and children are being facilitated, old people are being facilitated. So this journey is on to integrate the voters with the election system.
Absolutely. I think we are all in agreement that the Election Commission of India needs or deserves a pat on its back for a splendid and a marvelous job done really over the years as far as streamlining the entire election process is concerned. But talking about Nota, Sanjay Kumar.
If I talk about all the 5 assembly elections which were held recently, the Nota percentage of Nota went down in Rajasthan, it went down in Madhya Pradesh, it went down in Chhattisgarh, it went down in Mizoram as well, if I compare it with the previous assembly election. The problem is that we don't look at the figures and we just develop a perception when the data is available. Look at the data and you will find that there is a decline in the Nota. And there is an overstatement about Nota. Parties keep talking about that they lost because of Nota. I've done a careful analysis of that. And all those constituencies, if we look at the number of constituencies where number of people who voted for Nota is higher than the victory margin of Congress and BJP, it is equally divided in Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh, not only in 2018 election, in 2013 election as well.
Mr. Tandon, should Nota be a part of the voting or the electoral process?
No, one reason why Nota was very prominently highlighted in the media was that in Madhya Pradesh, again subject to correction, some 8 candidates of BJP lost because of Nota, and they included at least 4 ministers. So that's why it perhaps could got highlighted. In absolute number, numbers may be less, But the fact remains that there is a provision in nota and people are exercising it, and basically it is more to express their anger against either the candidate or the party as such. But it was a demand, because people were not going up to the polling booth to exercise their franchise, and there was that's the beauty of Indian election system. It has been so flexible that we have not been very rigid on every respect. As I said earlier, when there was a booth capturing, then the consensus was, why not try another alternative method, which was EVM. And now when EVM was being criticized, then VVPAT was introduced, and this time the counting was almost parallel, double. VVPAT votes were counted, and the EVM votes were also counted. And then there was a demand about, well, those who are not interested in either party, the nota was introduced. So I think a flexibility of the Indian election system and election commission has also helped in a way. So even today, I mean, we have seen a number of political parties criticizing the EVM on one pretext or the other. But again, the election commission has come out in a very clear terms that there is no question of going back to ballot paper, but whatever suggestions you want, we are ready to improve. So therefore, I think election commission has been very sensitive to the sentiments being expressed by various people. But unfortunately, some of political parties are making a political issue out of the handling of the election by the election commission, particularly in respect of the EVM, which is very unfortunate. And because we need to strengthen this system, Indian democracy will be strengthened if all political parties and all stakeholders, including the media, they take their responsibility very seriously and strengthen these institutions, rather than going by some frivolous comment or statement made by somebody, hiding his face, sitting in New York and addressing a press conference in London and questioning our electoral system. And we fall prey to that. So all that things we need to avoid. And that's why today, on this day, when we are celebrating the festival of democracy as election day, nationally, we should be discussing all these things in seriousness. Therefore, I think political parties must refrain from such propaganda, which is, there are elements within the country and outside also who are really jealous of Indian democracy. And therefore, and there have been elements in Indian politics who have been talking about wrecking the system from within. So they joined politics, our electoral system, openly claiming that we would wreck the system from within. Of course, they have been marginalized, but therefore we need to be very vigilant about Indian democracy, and therefore we need to strengthen our electoral system. And all hats off to Election Commission. Successive election commissioners in this country have done a great job, and I am glad that today the people who conduct these elections have been awarded and rewarded also by the President of India. I think that's a good sign.
Absolutely. Professor Sharma, what more needs to be done really so as to ensure that we strengthen the entire process?
I think, to my mind, 3 or 4 steps are required. One, that the political class as well as the election commission should come together to find the ways and means to decriminalize the elections, and the entry of the criminals into politics should be taken in a more serious manner. Though even now some steps have been taken, particularly at least the election commission and the court has ensured together that the candidates have to declare their criminal record, and they have to declare as to whether the cases are pending or not. Number 2, at the same time, I think we also should see in case of the kind of the coalition governments that are coming up. So the electoral reforms should be introduced as to how to really take care of this mushrooming, and whether there can be some kind of a limit on the expansion and explosion of political parties. Sometimes even one-man party also is there, 2-man parties are also there. So is it really required? If it is required, fine enough, go ahead. But at the same time, there should be a review of the impacts and how it has really worked. That is what I look at it. And at the same time, I would also say that the alternative kind of methods, for example, should we think in terms of proportional representation rather than one man, one vote and first past the post system? should be examine the relevance of the proportional representation in a country like India, which is so vast. Because
Sure.
in the smaller countries, proportional representation can be there, but can we apply it in India also? And what shall be the repercussions of this? Can this proportional representation would be more reflective of the will of the people and will be accommodative of the aspirations of people on a larger scale, or
Right.
one man, one vote is enough?
Absolutely. These are very valid points that you raised. I'd like to hear what Mr. Raut thinks about what you just said. Mr. Raut, your reactions to what Professor Sharma has just narrated or suggested.
Well, I think these are very important suggestions which are being made. See, electoral reforms are a continuing process and they have to be country specific. And I think we all can be proud of the fact that there is reasonable, good amount of electoral reforms that have taken place, led by the Election Commission and led by the legislatures and the governments which have been in position. There is definitely a journey to cover and there could be more to be done. I think immediately two challenges which are perhaps being on a day-to-day basis being confronted by the election management authorities. One is expenditure control and how the whole issue of financing of elections, the way it happens, but improvements can be done. A lot of work is being done on that area, but some more will be done I'm sure in the coming days. The other thing is that as we have a live national election coming up, I think based on the past elections, the challenge is how the social media, there should not be in the campaign, there should not be any misuse, or there should not be any type of illegal use, which definitely disturbs the level playing field in the elections. I'm sure that a lot of work is happening, but this is a very complex area. I think these are the two challenges which I am able to see. But the third thing that I have a personal aspiration that why not in this country, I'll just complete it. In this country, we should not have a complete participation of all the registered voters. The level of registration has gone up, the voter turnout has gone up, but I would like it come closer to the 100%. And let me just conclude this with one line. There was not a long time ago that youth were not greatly excited. They were not looking at it as something, a great stuff to go and vote in the election. But now for many years, we are seeing the youth showing up their fingers with the ink mark as it is being very fashionable. I think that trend should continue. The youth, the college, the school, the campuses should take the lead, and the democracy should be more and more complete in the coming days.
Okay, I've got very limited time on the program, so quick closing comments from the other guests as well. Sanjay Kumar, should voting be made compulsory?
No, I'm not in favor of making voting compulsory, but my own suggestion, one point would be something should be done to facilitate internal migrants to vote. Because almost 25 to 30% of population in India are internal migrants. People moving from village to the small town to big towns in terms of jobs and in terms of other revenues. So something to be done in order to facilitate them to vote in the place where they are living.
All right, Mr. Tandon?
No, one issue which is pending before the Election Commission is the government decision to go for proxy voting for non-resident Indians. That will be a very interesting and a very challenging task. The other thing is that to strengthen Indian democracy and our electoral system, as Professor also said, the responsibility lies with political parties, whether it is criminalization of election or money power. So these two things, we can't expect the Election Commission to be enacting laws and rules and regulations. It is basically for the political parties.
Absolutely.
Yeah, otherwise we will be weakening our system.
Professor Sharma, quick closing comment.
I think there is a need for developing some kind of a consensus amongst all stakeholders in democracy. And though we have done quite well insofar as the performance of democratic system is concerned, but at the same time, I would say that electoral reforms are the need of the hour.
All right. On that note, then, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.